So today we are going to really drill down on how to interview well and more importantly, how to go out and get that job. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Pam Muehlbauer. Pam is going to be our moderator today, and if you wouldn't mind telling us what that actually means, Pam, that would be great.
I sure will. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Glory said, my name is Pam Milbauer, and I will be handling the questions that come into the chat box today. So due to the large number of attendees, everyone's mics have been muted, but you can enter your question by activating the chat feature in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please address your questions to everyone or privately to all panelists. Once we have a couple of questions for Glory, I will turn on my camera for her to pause. If we don't get to your questions right away, please know that we are waiting for that topic to come up in the slide deck. Speaking of that slide deck, the entire presentation along with speaker notes will be emailed to everyone by end of day tomorrow, so Thursday eve afternoon. And then if you, let's see, trying to think. Some of the new features that we have also are the reactions with the smiley face down below. And also, if you need the closed captioning, you can use the CC feature at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen there as well.
Excellent, Pam. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. I also wanted to just double check. Did you hit record, Pam? We're going to be recording this session. So when you guys end up getting the follow-up email tomorrow, you're also going to have a copy of this recording as well. So it's nice because you can really be interactive in this workshop. And that is our hope, is to make this workshop as um, interactive as possible. And in addition to that, we're hopefully going to be able to answer your questions right now. One other thing I wanted to let you know too is that after the workshop's over, Pam and I do go through the chat. So if we haven't answered questions, we will email you an answer to that question tomorrow. We also want to encourage you to make sure that you ask questions. We find out oftentimes when you're asking a question, somebody else is thinking the same thing. So please, let's make this as interactive as possible. Before I get into this, I just want to briefly touch on some of the services that we offer at the Career Force. So with that follow-up email that you're going to get tomorrow, one of the pieces is going to include Career Force locations. So we want to encourage you to take a look at that. In addition, you're going to be able to find out where the Career Force located nearest to your home is, and you can participate in some of the benefits that we have to offer you. So some of the services include job services, which is just this. It could be workshops, could be practicing interviewing, mock interviewing. We also do job search. We also offer vocational rehab services along with veteran services. So if you are a veteran, first off, thank you for your service. But we have excellent reps on staff who can help you with additional services. And then we also have what's called the Dislocated Worker Program. So if you want to find out more information about that, I want to encourage you to get a hold of your local career force. So let's get moving right into the workshop. So today our topic is interviewing. And like I said in the beginning, we actually not only want you to interview well, we want you to get the job. So we're really going to drill down on that and how do you actually proceed? What do you say at the interview? What do you do after the interview, if anything? We're going to really talk about what to expect at the interview. And I'm going to teach you today on how to develop a method on how to answer some of those tough questions. And then after the interview, do you do anything? And if you do, what would that be? So let's first talk about preparing for the interview. So what I always say is that you got the phone call or you got the email notifying you that the company is interested in you and that they want to interview you. I always say dance around the kitchen a little bit. Oh, happy day. But now is when the work actually begins. So what you are going to want to do is you want to do some more research on the company that you're going to be interviewing for. One of the suggestions that we like to make during this workshop is that you check the company out on LinkedIn. If you're not familiar with using LinkedIn, I also want to encourage you uh, to participate in our LinkedIn and social media creative job search workshop, which you can find that on the Career Force MN website, just like you signed up for this workshop. But it is an excellent workshop that's going to give you some more insight on how to use LinkedIn and social media to your benefit to research the employer as well as get the job. So When you get that phone call and they're telling you that they want you to come in to interview, it's important during that time, one, to have a pen and a piece of paper, if ideal in a perfect world. Uh, you're going to find that when that person calls to tell you they want you to come in for an interview, it's crazy how in the background you will have the children are screaming, the dog is barking at the Amazon man. Unreal how that works. But first off, I want to make sure that you have correct and appropriate voicemail. So if you do have a lot of chaos going on and the phone is ringing and you know that it's a company asking you to come in for an interview, it's fine that it goes into voicemail, but then go grab a pen and a piece of paper, tell the family and the dog that you're hoping that this is a call for the interview. Go into the bathroom or whatever room, close the door, tell everybody to leave you alone, and write down the information when you call the interviewer back. So, of course, you're going to write down the time where the interview is going to be held, but you can also ask who's going to be interviewing you. We're going to talk today about the different types of interviews, and you're going to know what terms to use when you say, well, what type of interview is it going to be? Note that the person who's calling you to set up the appointment for the interview might not know the answers to these questions. So don't be taken aback, but it certainly won't hurt to ask. Then, as far as researching the company, I really want to encourage you to, at the very least, look up the company's mission statement or their vision. You also want to ask yourself, do my goals and my vision line up with the company, with their mission statement and what they're actually looking to achieve? The reason you want to ask yourself that is because it gives you more of a firm, concrete ability to interview really well because one, you're going to know more about the company. Two, I interviewed one time and they asked me, why do you want this job? And I was able to quote back the mission statement to them. And, the person who was interviewing me said, wow, I didn't even know that was our mission statement. I'm not saying that that's a great thing, but the beauty of it was I believe that was part of the reason why I was hired because I did the research on the company. I'm not talking about days and days of research here. I'm talking about 3 to 5 minutes. You can really get a good idea of the culture. It's also important that when you are actually being interviewed, that you ask smart questions that foster a two-way conversation. Now, I'm going to give you a real life story on what not to do. So, how it worked at my previous employer was that my office was towards the back of the building. And when you would walk into the building, the first person that you would see was Miss Jackie. And I would call Miss Jackie my first point of contact. Um, so what happened was I had originally interviewed this gentleman. He did an excellent job interviewing, walked him out to the front where Miss Jackie was, shook his hand, thanked him for coming in for the interview, and told him that we would be in touch. Now, in my interviewing process, I always turn to Miss Jackie because she was the first person to actually have contact and speak with the person who I was going to be interviewing. And then also, I held her in high regard, in high respect. She was near and dear to my heart because she knew her job and had done it for 15 years and knew her job very well. So her opinion also mattered to me deeply. So I turned to her and asked her, well, what did you think? And she had her eyes as big as quarters, said to me, you're going to hire him, aren't you? I said, not necessarily. I want to get your input too. She said, well, first off, he came in here with his cell phone. Now, first thing I want to really, really highly recommend is that you leave your cell phone in the car. Let me give you a couple scenarios. It is incredible how when you are about to go into the interview, you'll have a family member or someone uh, that's dear to you will text you something that could be upsetting. And it could actually ruin the interview for you because it could drastically change your mood depending on what the text said, correct? Second off, you would be surprised how loud a telephone is even when you have it on vibrate when you're in the middle of an interview. So I would prefer you keep your cell phone in the car. This gentleman brought it in with him. In addition to that, he did not acknowledge Miss Jackie. I don't know if you've been in a room where somebody hasn't acknowledged you, but it's very uncomfortable. Then he was texting and his phone rang and he answered the phone. When he answered the phone, he said hello, and then he swore at the person on the other end and said, "I told you I'm in an interview. I will call you when I'm done," and hung the phone up. Do you know that I did not hire that person based on what Miss Jackie's information was? And the reason is we have such a great staff, and I am not going to have somebody come in and call my great staff names. Or what are you going to say to me if I have you do something that you're not so crazy about? Are you going to, call me names behind my back? Do not lose a job based off of something like that. Please have, we call it small talk. Have some small talk. So as soon as you do introduce yourself to the person who is your first point of contact as you walk into the building for the interview, introduce yourself and say what job you're going to be interviewing for, and then have some small talk. Talk about the weather. We live in Minnesota. Goodness, you can talk about the Vikings. You can talk about fishing. The point is make that contact with this person. I really, really appreciate this slide. And the reason that I do is you can use it for a couple different things. So one of the benefits to this slide is I have used this in the past to write a cover letter. And it is called the T slide. It's actually taking your skills to remind you what they are and how they are going to line up with what the employer is looking for. The skills that the employer is looking for are coming right directly off of the job description. A lot of times when I'm working with you one-on-one, I find that oftentimes you don't really read the job description carefully, or you don't take it as serious as you need to. Before you go in an interview, I want you to make sure that you read the job description before, and I mean like 10, 15 minutes before you actually go into the interview. Refresh yourself. In addition to that, I want you to review the resume that you have sent for this specific job. Reason being, I work with people who have 5, 6, 7 different resumes going at one time. The reason they have that many resumes is not because they've reinvented the wheel with every one. It's because they're tailoring their resume towards the job they're applying for. Well, it's hard to remember all that. If you've got 7 resumes going on and 7 job descriptions and 7 interviews coming up, you need to figure out a way to break this down individually per interview. So what I say is never schedule 2 interviews in one day. That's too much. When you have that interview scheduled, that's the only interview you're going to focus on, and that's going to be the most important thing to you that day. So having said that, I always get out a piece of paper and I draw a T on it. On the left-hand side, I write job qualifications. And again, it's coming right off the job description. And on the right-hand side, I write my qualifications. So now let's just look at this example. So on the job qualification side, the employer is looking for a person who can come in and recruit team members. On my qualification side, I have it written that I have exceeded all recruitment goals by attending job fairs and sourcing new applicants from various job boards. Now, I also want to encourage you that if you can take this a step further, where you could either add in percentages or numbers. So let me give you an example. So I exceeded all recruitment goals by attending job fairs and sourcing new applicants from various job boards. In addition to that, we ended up adding 5 new team members to our staff. And as a result of that, it raised our sales by $2,500 a week. I'm just making this up, but I'm saying, do you see how that's even more effective? I also love this saying, and I want you to really remember it because it's important. You are the director of the story in my head. So when you are interviewing, you do not need to get into what color the paint was on the wall when you're giving a scenario, but you do need to give enough information so that I can follow you as if it were a movie in my head. So just remember, you are the director of the story in my head. Now, let's talk a little bit about mental preparation. Mental preparation is probably one of the most important parts of this interview that you can do previous to actually walking into the interview. The reason that mental preparation is so important is because oftentimes when I'm working with you one-on-one, you're coming off of a situation that could have been beyond your control. Talking about your previous employer, you're coming off of a situation where it could have the business shut down due to the pandemic. Maybe the industry is no longer flourishing like it used to because of the pandemic. Maybe you ended up getting fired. That's why it's so important for you to prepare mentally, because I do not want you going into that interview and discussing anything bad about that previous employer, even if things went haywire. Now, know this: there are a lot of jobs that have drastic changes occur based on need because of the pandemic. Many of us have had to, I call it evolution. We've had to evolve into maybe something different than what we did pre pandemic. So, having said that, if you were let go, if you were fired, I do not want you to say at the interview when they ask you, why did you leave your last job? I don't want you to say it was because I was fired and here's the reason why and get into negativity about the company, even though it may be true. The truth is that every employer that I've talked to, every single one, which it's been many, I've asked them two questions. What's the most important thing to you when you're hiring someone? And their answer has been, in one form or another, are they going to get along here? And then the second thing that is the most important to them is the company's reputation. So many employers have worked years and years to build up a good, strong, positive, solid reputation. And they do not want anybody coming in and talking negative about them because it may hurt their reputation. And they're not willing to sacrifice that. So, having said that, don't not get hired because you're still struggling with your past experience. This is where we're experts. So, if you are still struggling with what to say at the job interview when they ask you, why did you leave your last job? I want you first off to start getting used to saying, I was involuntarily separated. So, why did you leave your last job? I was involuntarily separated. And as a result, it has brought me here to you today. Now, again, we can get even in more depth about that. If you have this scenario, please feel free to reach out to us. It's important that you be truthful and realistic, but again, you don't need to be so detailed that you're telling me the color of the paint on the wall. Give me a brief scenario of why you left your last job, but I don't need to know all the details. I want it to be brief. Less is more. And again, avoid negativity. So let's talk about your physical preparation. So, of course, you're going to be neat and clean and well groomed, but also I thought that this was maybe going a little bit excessive when I heard this the first time, to be aware of scents. When I first heard that, I'm like, really? We even got to be aware of scents now? Until I ended up wearing my favorite perfume one day, and my work colleague who sits in the cubicle next to me was allergic to it. That was horrible. She was sneezing, her eyes were watery, and as a result, I ended up going to a store during my lunch hour and buying a different shirt. I felt horrible. But know that we have allergies. But another thing that I want to point out to you is that scent is known to trigger memories. So, what happens if you're wearing the same cologne that my ex-husband used to wear, and I can smell it and I think to myself, great, you smell like my ex-husband, you probably act like him too, and don't hire you based on something like that. So again, be aware of scents and make sure that you wear proper attire. So I always say that you dress one step above what the industry is asking for. Let me give you an example. Let's say you were going in to apply for or interview for a landscaping position. So let's talk a minute what a landscaper wears on the job. Typically, they wear a hard hat, maybe safety glasses. They have on probably a t-shirt or a long sleeve shirt. They typically would have a safety vest. Maybe they're wearing jeans. They have steel toe boots on and maybe gloves. Now, you don't go into the interview dressed like that. We're going to pretend that the interview is not on the job site. If it was on the job site, sometimes you're required to have a hard hat and safety glasses on in order to step foot onto the job site. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about now you're going to go to an interview into the office. So instead of wearing all of the landscaper garb that I just described, what you're going to do instead is I recommend for men to wear a long sleeve button down shirt that just presents very well. Make sure that it is clean and ironed. You can wear jeans, but make sure that they're clean. If you have on steel toe boots, it is known in the industry that if you have brand new steel toe boots, you're perceived as unskilled or inexperienced. So make sure you kick the curb a couple times with your boots so that they're not brand spanking new looking, but they're not too roughed up in either. For women, I want you to make sure that you don't have anything falling out. I've interviewed people, women in the past, where they leaned forward and I was concerned. Make sure that you don't have on big hoop earrings. Make sure that you don't have on anything that could possibly be a distraction. You want the interviewer to be paying attention to what you're saying and paying attention to you, not necessarily what you're wearing. Now, another skill that we are really experts at is offering a service called virtual mock interviews as well. So, because of the pandemic and previous to that, there have been a lot of virtual interviews. And so we're finding that employers are using virtual interviews more and more. So we can practice that with you. When we do the mock interview, we would discuss your background, meaning what is in your background? How is your lighting? Is it too bright? If it's too bright, sometimes it will, I call it wash you out or flush you out. Is it too dark so that I can't see you and it implies that you're trying to hide something? Do you see how some of these little specifics could actually make it to where you wouldn't get the job, and here you're thinking it's something completely different? So I want you to be able to get the job based on some of these inside jewels too. So let's talk next about location. You know, I'm coming to you today from beautiful Duluth, and I think it was probably like 7 or 8 years ago. We were located one block up. Do you know that to this day, I still have people who will have an appointment at 2 o'clock. They'll come in at 2:30 and say, Gloria, I went to the old office. Now, having said that, I want you to make sure that you know where you're going to be interviewed at. You know, we have it happen here a lot in the Duluth area, but I know it happens a lot in the metropolitan area as well. You might have corporate at one location and you have the rest of the industry at a different location. Make sure you get the address. I always recommend that you drive by the property the night before. You know, it's important for you to know if you need to take the elevator and that it's working. If the elevator's on the third, or excuse me, the interview's on the 13th floor and the elevator isn't working, goodness, you're going to wear yourself out just getting there. Arrive 15 minutes early, but not a half hour early. Half hour early is too early and it's creepy. But 15 minutes early is very appropriate. Once you get there, use the restroom. Go into the restroom, look in the mirror, and make sure everything is where it needs to be. I interviewed a gentleman one time who had something blue on his tooth, and I didn't know him well enough to say, Excuse me, sir, you have something blue on your tooth. But it distracted me during the whole interview. Be courteous to everyone on site. You know, I had somebody call me and they were very upset. And they said, I didn't get the job. And the reason that I didn't, Glory, is they said to me, We noticed when you parked in our parking ramp that you had a cigarette before you came in. And he said, Is that even legal? Now, do I agree with the way he was treated? No, but I'm not the one signing his paycheck. In addition to that, smoking is not a protected class. I don't have issue with smokers, but the deal is that it's not a protected class. So if an employer says no one's going to smoke on my job site, they do have the right to say that. Whether I agree with it or not doesn't matter. It's not a protected class. Make sure you have a travel plan. You know, I come to Duluth, and it is many, many, many times that I'll come to Duluth and I'll drive one way, and then the next day I will come, and due to the road construction, I have to take a completely different route. And in addition to that, I am still right now, I have to leave at least 30 minutes earlier than my usual time because of the construction, and it bottlenecks down to one lane. So you know as well as I do that that can really eat up time very quickly, and you run the risk of being to that interview late. I have yet to this day worked with anybody who was late for an interview and was able to get back in. I was never able to get them back in for an interview or for a re-interview. So If you're late, you may as well plan on not going because the chances of you getting that job just almost went out the window. It's also important for you to know where to park. You know, here, if you park in certain spots and it's illegal to park there, you might come out and your vehicle's towed. That kind of stuff can really happen. Just make sure that you're acting professionally, even when you are in the parking lot. Pam, I wanted to stop a minute before I get into the next screen and just see if we have any questions yet.
Yes, I did have a few questions. Some came in because you talked about, you know, when people get separated from their employer. And so I had some questions that came in about that. If somebody has signed a non-disclosure agreement, what answers can they provide for that, or how would they answer that?
Okay, so if you sign a non-disclosure, which that happens in a lot of different situations, what you're going to do is you're going to not talk about the company specifically, but you're going to talk more about the reason that you left. And again, this would be even more where I can get more specific with you and your scenario if you want to reach out to us after this workshop. But just because you signed a non-disclosure doesn't mean that you can't talk about it, but it does put you a little more restraint on what you can say.
Okay, and then we had a couple of more. Is it okay to say that you've been involuntarily separated? And if so, would the interviewer ask to explain that better?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So the answer is yes. Sometimes they do ask to explain it more. And again, I can get really specific with your case if you want to reach out to us, but let me just kind of give you a blanket statement here. So if they asked you why you left your last job and you said, I left my last job because I was involuntarily separated, and as a result, it has brought me here to you today. Well, Glory, can you tell me more about what that means when you say you were involuntarily separated? Then that's when you're going to get into, my last job that I was working, I ended up leaving that job as a result because I didn't feel that they were using my skills to the fullest. And since then, I have gone and gotten my certificate in Microsoft Word. I also hold a certificate in Microsoft Excel. And I really believe that I can make you a lot of money if you just end up giving me a chance. So, do you see how I addressed it, but got off of that subject very quickly and got right back into my skills and then took it a step further and talked to the employer about how I believe I can make you a lot of money and in turn I'll make some money too. So short and sweet, less is more in this situation when you're answering those questions.
All right, and then one last question real quick before we move on. If the new company calls the previous company, what can they share?
Excellent question. So they are only supposed to share the day you started, the day you quit, and would they hire you again? Now, I also want to let you know too that let's say I'm calling for a reference on you and they say, no, we would not hire that person again. You don't know how I'm going to respond to that. I might be saying, yes, I'm delighted to hear that because I want this person to come on board with me. The point is that you need to interview really well and convince me that you are the best person for the job. I need your help and I'm going to give you a chance because I also want to remind you that if I don't have somebody to do your job, chances are I'm probably doing your job and my job as well. So that's another really added benefit here is that when they need your help and you interview well, they're going to give you a chance, regardless of what they've heard for references. Let me touch base on this reference thing real quick before I get into something else. So, yes, I can call your supervisor and get a reference, but that's not my favorite person to call because they can only tell me the day you started, the day you quit, and would they hire you again. I want you to have three good references. They can be your supervisor, but you know who my favorite person to talk to is when I'm checking a reference on you? It is a person who is a work colleague or someone who can speak about your work ethics. Do you practice integrity? Are you a person of your word? Do you show up on time? So my point is that that's my favorite person to talk to because they're not bound by the same rules. Now it's important too to keep your references in the loop. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get going here. But it's important to keep them updated at all times. Let them know I've got an interview. I'm going to be interviewing tomorrow. Here's my resume. Here's the job description. Highlight on that job description your skills. You know, if you have a hard time telling me what your skills are, your references don't know all your skills. So remind them and let them know that this is what the company's looking for and this is what I can do. So let's talk about the different types of interviews that are out there. It's very easy to think that there's one interview, me interviewing you. But the truth is there is many different types of interviews. So first one is screening. Now there are different type of telephone calls that are called the screening interview. But I also want to let you know that on LinkedIn, they have a program where you can practice this telephone call screening interview. And then it records it and you can listen to it and see how it hears and see if there's anything you would want to change in your answer. It's really, really a neat benefit. So if you are having a telephone screening interview coming up, I want to encourage you to look at LinkedIn and practice the telephone call interviewing. The reason the companies are doing this telephone interview is because one, it saves time. It also helps them to stay organized, but then also they can reduce it down to the people who they really are interested in and who qualify for the position. As opposed to interviewing 15 people, they can reduce it down to possibly 3, however many the organization is giving the interviewer permission to interview. Another type of interview is called the behavioral, and that is where how did you behave in a stressful situation? So I always love this saying. It says, tell me about a time. And again, now you're the director of the story in my head. So tell me about a time when things didn't go well on the job and what did you do? You know, those types of scenarios happen because we're human beings and none of us are perfect. But how did you handle that stressful situation? Were you able to come up with some resolution? Were you able to problem solve? If you were able to problem solve, tell me more. How did you problem solve? Another interview is a stress interview. Now, there's two different types of stress interviews. So, one could be where they actually are recreating a challenging situation. So, we ended up having a great team project that we were doing. And how did you handle it when one of the team members was not participating as much as everybody else was? Okay, so again, you're going to recreate a challenging situation and you're going to talk about how did you actually handle that. One of the things I want to encourage you to do is if it was a team project, please give the team credit as well. Don't you take only the credit unless you were the only one who did the project. Okay, the interviewer is trained to pick out how are you as a team player? Are you working well with others while they're listening to your answer? So another stress interview could be, and it goes right along with the work sample. So let me give you a true life example. I work with welders, and many of them will go, they will do the actual interview. They've even done the telephone interview. They'll do the interview in person. Then the interviewer will take them out into the shop and they will have to do a weld. When they do that weld, then it is brought over to a vice grip and put stress on it to see if it breaks or not. They also may bring it over to an x-ray machine and see if there's air bubbles in the weld. So that is another work sample and stress sample interview, still part of the interview. Another one is a video conference where we did already talk a little bit about that, and I'm encouraging you to do a mock interview with us. But you know, a video conference too can be intimidating. So I've had people who they're like, Lori, they want me to do a virtual interview tomorrow and I don't have any equipment. Come on down to the Career Force because we have the camera, we have the computer, we have the audio, we have all of the equipment that you would need to do a very good virtual interview. In addition to that, we have rooms that have the right background, they have the right lighting so that you can be successful at this interview. But I want you to look at it for a moment on why a company would do a virtual interview besides pandemic. Another reason is it saves travel cost, but it's still considered a person interview. an in-person interview. So having said that, it's important for you to know where the camera is on your computer. I am practicing good eye contact right now with the camera, but I also want you to note how different this feels when I'm talking this way and not looking at the camera. Another really cool little tidbit about virtual interviews is that you can write on Post-its their mission statement, prompts to help remember you to talk about different situations or scenarios, and you can put those Post-its all the way around your screen here. So the interviewer won't see them, but it's a great tool for you to remind you on, oh yes, that's right, I wanted to talk about that scenario or that situation. Peer group. Now that is meet and greet. That's also with your prospective coworkers, but I want to take it a step further. So let's say that I just interviewed you and it was for a factory position, and now I'm going to have these two gentlemen give you a tour of the factory. When they're walking you around the tour, you don't know for sure if I have offered them an additional $20 to come back to my office after the tour is over and report back to me on what you said. That's legal to do. So your interview doesn't end until you're actually signing on the dotted line on the first day of employment after you're signing your conditional employment offer. Okay. So remember that too, that the peer group isn't walking you around the factory just because they don't have anything better to do. Now, another interview scenario could be a luncheon, or they take you out for supper or for coffee, but it's a social situation. Please note that that is still the interviewer. I had a gentleman call me up after a luncheon interview and he said, Glory, it went really well. He said, but I had to tell him. Anytime you tell me you had to tell him, that's a first red flag. I said, you had to tell him what? He said, well, he took me out for lunch and I was thinking that we were getting to be good friends. So I told him about my past and all the things that happened. I said, did you get the job? And he said, no. Nope, I haven't heard anything from him. I don't think I got it. I thought it went really well, but I probably shouldn't have done that. My point out of that is that the luncheon is still the interview. Going out for supper is still the interview. Going out for coffee is the interview. If you are doing that, I want you to encourage you not to order spaghetti or barbecued ribs. Don't order the most expensive thing on the menu because the boss is paying or your potential boss. But I want to encourage you to possibly order the special, but also you need to keep in mind that has to be something that you can still talk and eat at the same time. General questions. So let's get into some of those general questions. We've talked a little bit about it, um, but some of the general questions are, tell me about yourself. When we would interview, we asked everybody the exact same questions, and that's pretty common, but it's not the hard and fast rule. But we asked everybody the same questions because we wanted to give everybody the same playing field. Now, how the interview went, of course, was based on your answers, but these are all called open-ended questions. So we were taught as interviewers to ask you, tell me about yourself, and then we were taught to put zippers on our lips and let you go ahead and talk. Now, I can't legally ask you how old you are, but you tell me. I can't ask you if you're married, but you tell me. I can't ask you if you have children, but you tell me. Can't ask you your sexual preference or your religious preference, but you tell me. And you say stuff to me like this. When I say, tell me about yourself, you say, well, I was born in so and so, and I have this many children, I've been married for this many years, and I just need a job, man. Now, what does that have to do with the job? My point is when they ask you, tell me about yourself, keep it within the job and what they're looking for. So I want you to give yourself permission to say 3 skills that are related to the job you're applying for. Not anything about who you are as a person in regards to you were born in so and you have this many children. Keep the children and the fact that you might have a significant other out of the interview. I've had people get upset with me and they're like, well, Glory, I have kids and I want to talk to the interviewer about my kids because it shows that I'm grounded, I'm rooted, not going anywhere, I have mouths to feed. Now, my answer to that is, isn't that wonderful? We all want to believe that every employer out there loves children, but we don't know that. And you don't know for sure if the employer is thinking, great, you have children and a significant other. Now they're going to be calling here every day. The daycare is going to blow up and you're not going to be able to have daycare. So you'll be calling in. You can't come to work. You're going to bring all those snotty nose diseases into this place where coming from your house, from the children. My point is that you don't know. So keep them out of the interview, but instead talk about how you are the best person for the job. I don't know for sure if you did grab a pen and a piece of paper, but if you don't remember anything else, I would love for you to write this down and to start telling yourself this. I am the best person for the job. When you are interviewing and when you're job searching, when you're out and about trying to get a decent paying job with gainful employment, it's very, very easy to be hard on yourself. Now is not the time. Interviewing is a time when you need to tell me why you are the best person for the job. You need to be able to list those skills off and line them up with what I'm looking for. There were times I would interview people and I would think to myself, good grief, did you even read the job description? Or they would say stuff to me like, what do you do here? You're going to be one step above everybody else who's interviewing, and how you're going to do it is you're going to research the company. You're going to find out about their mission statement and their vision. You're also going to have some answers that are very, very good based off of what the company is looking for off of that job description. Excuse me. Pam, I wanted to check in with you real quick. Plus, I need to take a drink of water.
All right, so I had a couple of questions come in. What is the best answer for how do you address or how do you handle conflicts? I know that we're going to get into some techniques here shortly, but
Yes, I can touch base on that. That's an excellent question. So, how do you handle conflict? It is super, super important that you briefly mention what the conflict was, but that you get right back into the problem solving piece of it. And I'm going to give you an actual example here. And we're going to use what's called the STAR um, answers. It's an acronym that's going to be able to help you to kind of remember exactly how to go through this. So, before we get into that, let's talk about some of the different types of interview questions that you may be asked. So, behavioral questions are just that. How did you behave in a situation? And it sometimes directly relates to some of your responsibilities. So, for instance, give me an example of how you set goals. Describe a time when you had to solve a difficult problem. Tell me about a time when you took the lead on a challenging project. Describe what you did in the situation, but keep in mind the qualities and the characteristics that the company's looking for. Please keep that in mind. It's easy when you are nervous and you want that job really bad to, I call it chasing rabbits, to start to answer the question, but the next thing you know, you're talking about something totally different. That happens to us. In the event something like that happens, you can always ask, did I answer that question or would you like more information? Sometimes they'll say, no, Gloria, you did answer that question. And they'll go on to the next one. Or if they need clarification, that's a great time for them to be able to tell you. So now I talked about this acronym, and we're going to actually get into a great answer for a problem. So I absolutely love this technique. And the reason for it is because I can easily remember the STAR acronym while I'm interviewing. So S stands for the situation. So what was the situation? And I'm just going to briefly go through this, but I'm going to give you a real life example. You're going to talk about the task. So what was the task that needed to be accomplished? What action did you do? And what was the end result? So what was the outcome of your actions? Again, if you can think of something ahead of time, when you get the follow-up email from us tomorrow, I would recommend that you print this. I'd recommend you print the whole PowerPoint off, but if you can only print one page off, print this page off. Underneath the situation, write out the situation. Again, it doesn't need to be long, detailed, but it does need to be enough prompts for you to recall it when you're talking about it at the interview. So let's use a scenario. So situation. So our supply room was disorganized, and as a result, it was ending up having higher costs for the company because there were duplicate supplies that were continually being ordered. Nobody knew for sure what was in that supply cabinet. So I told my supervisor that, I have an idea that I think would work really well for organizing our supply room. Would you have a problem if I went in and just, did a little bit of organizing and then see what you thought? If you liked it, then I will organize the whole supply cabinet. Supervisor said, "Yeah, that's great. Go in and, see if you can do some organizing. It's a mess in there and I don't know what to do with it." So I created a map and a labeling system for the supply room. I labeled all of the shelves and created a map to show the staff where to find and return the supplies. As a result, my supervisor and my coworkers were really happy because they really liked the process. It helped to keep the supply room orderly, helped staff to find what they were looking for, and it saved us money by reducing duplicate ordering. The process is still being used today. Now, my point out of this example is one, it's an excellent example. It fits right into the STAR method. But in addition to that, you have to think about this ahead of time before you go into the interview. The reason for it is you want to be able to pull out some type of situation that happened to you in your previous position. It doesn't have to be the one that you were just working at last, but the example needs to be one that applies to what the employer is looking for. So if they need you to come in and you're going to be doing sales, you would want your STAR method to pertain to something in sales. So you want to keep it employer and job appropriate. And again, if you're struggling with, well, I don't know for sure what to use, reach out to us because we can really narrow that down for you as well and give you some different suggestions and ideas. Another one of the interview techniques is the sandwich technique. And I really like this one too. Now, we've kind of briefly talked about the sandwich technique throughout this whole workshop, and that is that we are going to talk briefly about a personal weakness, but we're not getting into great detail. Again, we're not talking about the color of the paint on the wall, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk about it briefly, and then we are going to encase it into something positive again. So let me give you a real life scenario. Oftentimes they will ask you, what is one of your weaknesses? Boy, that's a tough question. It's designed to throw you off. And the reason that is so fascinating is that, you can tell me a lot of times when you and I are talking and it's not an interview, you can tell me all the things that you can't do, all of your weaknesses, but you don't want to stay on that subject. You want to turn it around into something positive. So, for instance, when I interviewed for this job, they asked me, Glory, what is one of your weaknesses? And my answer was Excel. Excel spreadsheets are not my favorite thing in the world to do. I kind of get a glaze over my face even when I have to do them. But I do know that they are very important in this role. So what I'm willing to do is to take a refresher course before my first day of employment. So do you see how I acknowledge the fact that, yep, I do have a weakness. I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to take a refresher course before my first day of employment. So it's not going to cost Mr. Employer any money to get me retrained and reskilled back up. But I've taken what possibly could have been a negative situation and turned it back into something positive. Softening technique. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker and how did you handle it? That one too is designed to maybe throw you off a little bit during the interview process. So, one of the ways that you can answer this one is you can repeat the question back to them, but use softer language. So, give you an example. A time when I had a miscommunication with a coworker was when my boss had given me instruction on what our task was to be. And I wasn't really clear on exactly what we were supposed to do. So I was talking to my coworker, and my coworker said, "No, we're supposed to do it this way." And I had understood that it was supposed to be a different task that we were supposed to do. So what I did was I went to my boss and said, you know what, we need some clarification on our exact task. I don't know if I misunderstood or if my coworker did, but would you please explain it to me one more time so that we can get it done correctly? So do you see how, again, you're owning it, but you're using a softer technique? Even your tone of voice has gotten softer. But that is a very appropriate answer. You know, I want you to think about how many times we are on the job when we're not 100% sure what the task is. And if you can't ask your supervisor, or if you can't ask your coworker and know that you're going to get a good sound answer, it makes it a very uneasy place to work. So that's one of the reasons you're being asked this question at the interview is how are you going to handle conflict? Are you just going to avoid it? Are you not going to say anything? So again, it's a great way to use as a wonderful example to use during the interview. Less is more technique. I've talked about that several times. Briefly explain the mistake, but quickly switch over to what you learned and how you improved. We all make mistakes, but what did you actually learn from it? And again, I want you to think about this way before you go into the interview. It's a wonderful way to prepare yourself, but what it also does is it builds up your confidence level so that you can go out and actually get that job, in addition to interviewing very, very well and knowing what to say during the interview itself. I can remember a lot of times when I was at the interview, I would wonder to myself, now, why are you asking that question? Remember, you always keep it within the job description itself. If you can keep your interview answers within the job description, your chances of getting that job go way up because you not only have researched the company, you know what this role is going to be. And that is impressive to me as an interviewer because many of the other people I have interviewed do not know anything about the job, nor did they do any research on the company. See how you can just be one step above everybody else just by doing that. And we're talking maybe an additional 5 minutes added into your day of research. Closing the interview, it is very important that you stay positive and that you thank the interviewer. You know, I had a gentleman one time that I worked with, and we interviewed two people and they were neck and neck. Well, there was only one job. Know that that happens sometimes. Since there was only one job, I could only pick one person. So I picked the person who I thought was going to be the best fit. They came in and they only worked for about a month because they ended up getting a better job offer elsewhere. That happens. So between these two people, the one that I didn't pick, I called him up and told him, I'm sorry, we didn't pick you. Thank you for interviewing and taking the time. You were second in line. You did an excellent job. If anything doesn't work out, I'll call you back and let you know. Well, this gentleman was so pleasant with me. He said, Glory, thank you so much for letting me know. I absolutely love your organization. I would be willing to come in and even do some volunteer work. Please reach out to me if there's anything I can do to help. Now I'm impressed because that was his answer. He didn't say something to me like, well, great, I didn't want that job anyways, and hang up on me. That response I have gotten too. Well, what ended up happening when this person left after only being with our company for a month was I called that person back and gave him the job. So you want to stay positive and you want to thank the interviewer regardless of what happens. If you got hired on the spot or if they're going to get back to you or if you were second in line, don't burn your bridges. It's also important to ask some really good closing questions. One of the questions that I want to encourage you to ask is, when can I start? Now, if you don't feel confident enough to say it that way, at least say, when are you looking to fill the position? Now, you want to know that because if it's 3 weeks or 3 months from now, you're going to want to know if you need to keep looking for employment elsewhere until they finally make a decision. Fortunately, there are so many jobs available right now today than people that are willing to work. So this doesn't happen as much where they take a long time to decide, but it still does happen. It's also important that you record, whether it be on a little piece of paper that you have with you during the interview or long-term memory bank, the date and time of your next contact. So what that means is, let's say that the interview's over, you've thanked everybody, and they say, and you ask them, when are you looking to fill the position? And they say, well, Glory, we are going to be filling the position within the next 2 to 3 weeks. That could be a standard answer, correct? What I want you to say at that time is, oh, okay, great. So if I haven't heard back from you in 2 to 3 weeks, could I reach back out to you and just check to see if you've made a decision? And if they say, sure, that'd be fine, or they might say no. But if they say, sure, that'd be fine, then that's a leading uh, area for you to come in and say, who should I get in contact with? And what would be the best method? Should I call? Should I email? Should I stop by? So my point is put that into your long-term memory. When they say 2 to 3 weeks, they've given you permission to call back, do that. Please always, always, always follow up with a thank you note. Now, the standard in the industry with thank you notes is that one, you always give a thank you note, but you can do it in different formats. So let's say that you've only been communicating through email. Then it's very appropriate for you to do your thank you note through email. In other words, you can email the interviewers the thank you. One of my favorite ways is to go to the dollar store and I buy a card that just says thank you on the front, and you open it up and it's blank on the inside. Now, of course, you can get it however you want, whatever you're comfortable with the card. But what I did was I would write on the left-hand side my email and my phone number. On the right-hand side, I would put thank you, and then I would put the people's names. So if you've got more than one person interviewing you, then I suggest that you ask for the people, the interviewers, business cards. Otherwise, if you can remember their names, great, but that's tough to do. But if you can get their business cards, but I want to make a point here that if they introduce themselves to you as Mr. Johnson, then that's how you refer to them in the thank you card as Mr. Johnson. If they said that their name is Bill, then you can refer to them by their first name in the thank you card. I always handwrite, thank you for the opportunity to interview with ABC Supply. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Glory Mitchell. The reason that this thank you card or note or email or voicemail, you can leave voicemail as well. The reason it's so important is because it is putting you in front of the employer one more time. So it's giving you the opportunity to get in front of that employer and say, you know what, I really want this job. And in addition to that, I just want to thank you for the opportunity that I even got to interview for this job. It is a known fact that when you are grateful and thankful for what you already have, the universe brings you more. The interviewer looks at it like, you know what, this person is thankful and grateful, and I guess they're probably really nice to work with. So I'm going to give them a chance. I've had many employers tell me over the years that that was the tipping point. They had two people neck and neck. They didn't know for sure who to hire, but the person who sent the thank you card was the one who got hired. You want to make sure that your thank you card is also genuine, and make a point to highlight how you fit and your desire for the position. But again, the point is to make it so that I call it pulling at their heartstrings, so that they know, one, you really want the job, two, you're thankful and grateful and you're easy to work with, and you get along well with others. Contact and prepare your references. So we did briefly touch on this, but I just want to dive down a little bit deeper on this one. One of the worst things that I did not enjoy when I was interviewing was calling your references and they had no idea that you use them as a reference. And they will say mean stuff like, what? She said she could use me as a reference. I'm not going to be her reference, and hang up on me. Those scenarios really did happen. It's important, one, that you ask your reference for permission to use them as a reference. Two, you need to keep them updated. So every job you're applying for, print them off a job description. Get out your highlighter and highlight the skills that that job is looking for. So if it says punctual, dependable, a person of integrity, practices the golden rule, highlight all those skills and make sure it is in front of your reference. In addition to that, give them a copy of the resume that you sent in with this job. So the reference can look at both the job description and the skills that you have and talk about them when I call and ask for the reference. So it'd be great if I call and ask a reference. So tell me a little bit about what they're like working for. And you can start to list off some of the things that I'm not only have written in the job description, but you're telling me this person is exactly what I'm looking for. Just make sure you keep them informed. That's the whole point. So Pam, this looks like a great time for questions.
So, regarding the thank you, is it okay to thank someone through LinkedIn if working with a recruiter?
Yes. Yes, that is okay. Um, I am all about the more personable you can get, the better. But sometimes that's the only way that you can get a hold of them. Sometimes, let's face it, we don't even know the actual company that we are applying for. It could be done through a staffing organization, but you just do the best you can with the information that you're given.
Okay, great. Before we go into the next section, I did have a couple of questions that came up about disability. Um, how do you address that when it comes to having disabilities or possibly old age? And also, can employers legally ask about a visible disability?
Okay. So first off, if you do have a disability, one of the areas I want you to reach out to is our vocational rehabilitation through Career Force. They're the experts in answering some of these questions. So I don't know a lot about it, but they do. So that's who you want to reach out to. I do not believe it is legal for an employer to ask you during an interview about a physical disability unless it's a job that is listed in the job description itself of the physical requirements that they're asking you to do. So sometimes you'll read a job description and it will say in that job description, must be able to lift 50 pounds, must be able to walk, must be able to do steps, must be able to travel. So read the job description, because if they have it listed in there of these are the physical requirements that you must be able to do and you can't do them, then don't apply for that position because they're making it very clear. Now, there are accommodations that can be made as well, but again, that gets right into the vocational rehab specialty. I want you to go to the experts and get some really good sound advice on that. Pam, do you have another question? We actually do have some time here.
Let me check. I do have a couple of other questions. One was the question of where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? How would somebody answer that one?
Okay, that's excellent. Excellent question. And I would just plan on them asking you this, or they might say, what are your career aspirations? So first off, the reason they're asking you that question is because they want to know if you're going to stay with them for a while and if that's what your plan is. So somebody had asked earlier about being an older person who is interviewing. You know, I've interviewed older people, which, by the way, we do the Employment Over 50 workshop. I want to encourage you to attend that workshop. We talk a lot more about age and what do you say at the interview. But I interviewed a person one time and I said, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? And they said, well, I'm going to be retired. I'm going to be out of here. Man, I just need a job for a little bit, couple years here, and I'm gone. Now, he was being truthful with me and I appreciated that, but here's the deal. I didn't hire him. And the reason was because I want to hire somebody, I want to train them, teach them the job, teach them how to do it really well, and have them keep working for me forever. Now, the reason for that is because that's how I'm going to make the most money. So when you're giving some of these answers, if you follow the money, you're going to stay within what the employer wants to hear, for one thing, because they are in business to make money. And as long as they're making money, you're going to get a paycheck and you'll continue to have a job. But the second piece is to remember that they're putting time and effort and training into you. So let's say you do plan on retiring in three years. The appropriate answer is, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Your answer should be, I see myself working for you. And hopefully I will have gotten a promotion. Now, if you got to practice this in front of a mirror until you believe it so that I'll believe you when you're telling me that, then that's what you need to do. But I want you to give the employer the impression that you're going to still be working for them. Now, here's the truth of the matter. None of us know where we're going to be tomorrow. We're only guaranteed right now, right here, correct? So you might have plans to retire in 3 years, but who's to say you're really going to do it? Do you know that I work with people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, who are still working and loving every minute of it? And they may have planned on retiring, but they found out it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. You know, we've been spoon fed as a society about retiring, but not everybody wants to be at home all by themselves. You know, since the pandemic happened, that has become a real strong reality. There's a gentleman that works at our Walmart, and I'm not real good at age, but I would have to say he's probably in his 70s. And I walked up to him one day and I said, You know, I'm a job counselor and I have kind of a personal question. Would you mind if I asked you it? And if you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to answer. He said, Sure, go ahead, ask. I said, Are you working here at Walmart because you have to or because you want to? And he said, I'm working here at Walmart because I want to. He said, I got sick and tired of being at home day in, day out. And he said, I absolutely love rubbing elbows with people, and that's why I'm here. And he's the greeter. And I mean, I tell you what, he makes you feel great about walking into Walmart. So my point is that you want to give the employer the impression you're going to be with them for a very long time, even though none of us are guaranteed anything outside of today, right here, right now. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the self evaluation. You know, one thing that I find after an interview, it is incredibly easy to be tough on yourself. So you do, I call them the woulda, shoulda, couldas, meaning I wish I would have said that, or I could have said this, or I should have did that. Um, I want you instead to focus on what went well. Please remember that oftentimes when you're interviewing, there is only one job, and they may be interviewing three people, but there's still only one job. So focus on what went well. It's easy to reach out to us and get some feedback right after the interview because it's still fresh in your mind and we can talk about some of your answers, but I'm not going to get into anything that I think you did wrong. I'm going to talk to you about what went well. And what we're going to focus on are those skills. It's important to reflect, but not where you're beating yourself up. If the interview didn't go very well, it's also important to keep some perspective and don't take it so personally. You know, a lot of times when we're interviewing, I've had people call me up and say, that was nothing but a waste of time, Glory. They never had any intention on hiring me. Well, you know what? I beg to differ. There is no such thing as a waste of time when you are interviewing. It's great experience and it's a great learning tool where you can learn what to do, what to say, what not to do, what not to say, but learn from the experience. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get. So that's why I also want to encourage you again to reach out to us and let us practice with you. Ask yourself, well, how could I have improved? Review the questions that could have been answered differently. I love that we have this on the screen where it says the last comment is contact your interviewer. I think that that would be wonderful. I think it's a great suggestion and we are not going to remove it from the slide. But the truth is I have yet to have an interviewer give my clients feedback. And I don't know if that's just in this area or what the actual deal is, but when you contact your interviewer, don't be surprised if you don't get any feedback or you don't ever hear from them again. You know, the truth is you're going to be lucky to hear if you didn't get the job. When I'm working with employers, a lot of times I'm saying, can't you at the very least let the people know that you filled the position? You know, send an email, do a phone call, leave voicemail. A lot of clients, and I don't recommend you do this. I have a lot of clients who sit around and wait for that phone to ring or for the email to come through saying they got the job. When they find out they didn't get the job, it is really, really disheartening. So don't do that. Keep applying and get it to a scenario where you have more jobs to pick from than what you're able to work. That truly can happen. Many of our clients will find 5 jobs. They apply for all 5 of them. They interview really well with all 5 of them. And next thing you know, they got 5 job offers. You guys, this kind of stuff really happens. So master how to interview really well, and you will run into the same scenario where you're going to get the job. Now, when do you start to talk about money? Let's face it, we all work for money. That's why we work. If you love your job, that's a bonus. You do not talk about the money at the interview. And I've had a lot of people say, what? Well, when in the world am I supposed to talk about the money then? I thought it was always talked about at the interview. The answer is no, you do not talk about the money at the interview. And we're going to really talk, drill down on this. So, Pam, I would like for you to put in the chat careeronestop.org. This is a website that, let's say you want to apply. I'm just making this company up. Say you want to apply for ABC Supply, but you're not sure what they pay. You can go on careeronestop.org and find out the pay range of ABC Supply, what they're paying for different roles within their company. Then you can make a good decision on whether you even want to apply. The only time that you can talk about money at the interview is if the employer brings it up. And they typically will say something like this: well, Glory, so far this interview is going really well, but I was wondering, what type of salary are you anticipating for this role? And then they're taught, put zippers on their lips and just let you talk. Boy, that's an uncomfortable situation. The right answer is right in the middle. So let me tell you, you've done your research, you've gone on Career One Stop, you found out, and again, I'm making this up, you found out that the pay range for ABC Supply for a starting position is $17 to $19. I have experience already working at a different company that was same and similar. So because I already have experience, I'm bringing that to the table as an asset. I'm going to talk about that experience and how it's going to be a great fit for the new company that I'm interviewing for. I'm also going to take it a step further and talk about how I am the best person for the job. When they ask me about the salary range or what kind of salary am I expecting, my answer would be, I did a little bit of research and discovered that for this role that I'm interviewing for, the salary range is around $17 to $19 an hour. So I wanted to let you know that because of my experience, I really believe that I am worth $18 an hour. So I want you to go right into the middle of that pay range if you have experience. If you don't have experience, then I want you to do the 17. Here's the reason. Most people who, if given an opportunity to give a salary range, they go for the highest because we all work for money. So they go for the $19 an hour, and they might not be getting the job just based off of that. So again, don't lose a job because of something as simple as you gave the wrong number for your salary range. It's also important to know that there's negotiation that can happen here too. So I'll have people call me up and they'll say, Glory, so my last job I was making 27 bucks an hour. Now this job they offer me $25 an hour. And I don't know if I can take that. So then what I will do is I'll have a conversation with you about their benefits. So let's talk about their medical. Do you have to pay for it? Do you have to pay for family? What's the deductible? Do you get vision? Do you get dental? How about your vacation? Do you have paid time off? Do you have sick time? Do you have vacation and sick time? Can you negotiate where, okay, you'll accept the $25, but they'll give you an additional week's vacation? Do you see how there are all different types of negotiations that can happen that actually makes it to where the $25 an hour lines up with being $27 an hour because you're not paying as high of a premium for your medical, or you're not paying any premium for your vision and your dental, or you're getting an additional week for vacation time. So I want you to look at the whole big picture besides just looking at those dollar numbers. And again, we all work for money. So I get that part, but I'm just telling you, this is going to be part of your research. We all know that when you're putting all this time and effort into applying, good night. Sometimes that takes 2 weeks to apply for a job. Well, then I've had people call me up and say, Gloria, if I would have known they were only paying $10 an hour, I wouldn't have wasted all my time. Now, I always say to you that it's not a waste of time because you got more experience on doing a better resume. If you went and interviewed, you got experience interviewing. But careeronestop.org is a great way to help you so that you can make a better decision on which companies you really want to go after and get the jobs. Don't forget to prepare. So, in giving you kind of an overview of this workshop, I'm really, really hoping that the research piece has really sealed in your mind that, you know what? I need to do some research now that I've got this interview coming up. I'm going to find out about the company's mission statement. I'm going to find out what their vision is. I am going to see if it lines up with who I am and who I want to work for. And if it does, I'm going to remember that and talk about it at the interview. I'm also going to make sure that my skills match up with what the job is looking for. A lot of times I have people that they will talk about something, and it may be because they're nervous, but they'll talk about something that happened at their previous job that has nothing to do with the new job. You need to be very careful of that because the interviewer could be anticipating that, oh, so you're talking about that? Well, we don't do that here. But since you're bringing it up, you must like doing that. So if you get that job offer, are you going to bail on me? Let me give you a better example. I had a person who they were an excellent forklift driver. They could do everything with a forklift, but we didn't own a forklift. Now, I never did interview that person because their resume portrayed itself or presented itself as if I were to hire that person in a retail store position, and if they got a forklift driver job, I'm assuming that the forklift driver job would probably pay more than my retail position, so they'd bail on me. Remember that the company makes the most money if they hire you, train you, and keep you working with them forever. Make sure you're checking your attitude and your appearance. Ask the family members, how does this look for an interview uniform? Do not wait until the day of the interview to get your clothes together. I have a lot of people I work with, excuse me, who have been unemployed for 6 months or more. They don't have a lot of money. In addition, they can't go out shopping and buy a brand new interview uniform. But what they can do is reach out to us here at the Career Force, and we can link you with different nonprofits out there that offer vouchers for interview clothes. We actually have programs that sometimes we can offer you a voucher to go buy brand new steel toe boots. There's small vouchers for buying hammer, nails, carpenter belt, just different tools. So don't let that stop you from getting the job. The point is reach out to us ahead of time so you can be prepared. So when they do ask you to interview, come in to interview, you know what you're going to wear and you know that it's appropriate. Know the different types of interviews that you can encounter. I love that advice because a lot of times when the interviewer is calling you to set up the time and date for the interview, you're nervous. And if they tell you, oh, and by the way, Gloria, it's going to be a panel interview, because you attended this workshop, you're going to know exactly what that means. Panel interview means that it's probably going to be 2 or more people. Could be all the way up to 10 people. You don't know, but it means it's going to be a group. Remember to prepare for the questions that you'll be asked. So when you get your follow-up email tomorrow, if you can print this off, if you can't, come to the Career Force, you can print it off for free and use it right in the STAR method, right in a real life scenario that happened with you and how you can apply the STAR method at the interview. So when you're asked some of those tough questions, you're not going to be dumbfounded by them. You won't be shocked by them, but you will be prepared to give an excellent answer for some of those tough questions where the other people who are interviewing are not prepared and are not ready to do that. So again, you'll be one step above a lot of the other competition. And remember that there's still more to do after the interview. Just because the interview's over, there's still the thank you note. There's still following up with your references. You know, the beauty of keeping your references involved and clear that they're going to be receiving a phone call or email is that they'll keep you involved too. So it's great because your references may call you up and say, "Hey, Glory, I just had ABC Supply call. They got a reference on you. Boy, they really sound like they're a good company and they sound like they're very interested in you. And these are the things that I said." But do you see how you're being informed along the way from your references as well? Don't forget to evaluate your performance, but please don't be so hard on yourself. Practice grace and mercy towards yourself and know that there's no such thing as wasting your time when you went interviewed. I always say some will, some won't, next. Some will like me, some won't, next. Some will hire me, some won't, next. That's how you need to look at this until you get your ideal career set up for you so that you can go to work and have gainful employment and not have to be going through this process anymore. So, Pam, I think it looks to me like we're down to about 10 minutes, so we've got some time for questions.
Well, I do have a couple that came in. One person has had some unfortunate experiences when asking questions at the in-person interviews, so they were asking the interviewer some questions. The last one was what type of software they use to manage their products. She had worked in her previous experience was with a Fortune 100 company, and the new organization was a smaller one. And the hiring manager made the comment was, "We aren't X, employer, name." And
Yeah.
she wanted to know, how would you turn that around?
Boy, that is a really great question. So let me preface it a little bit here first. One of the skills that you need to do when you're being in the interview process is you need to, I call it, read the room. There sometimes are human resource people that are interviewing you who do not know your role. So they haven't actually worked your specific job. In addition, they might not have even worked with the software that you're referring to. So I don't want you, sometimes it's really great to name drop, so it could be the software, it could be the person that you know, somebody who is going to shine favor on you with the company because you know that person. In this situation where you had mentioned software that they don't have, you have to be so careful about accidentally making the person who's interviewing you look like they don't know the answer. So you can always say, well, and when they said, well, we're not ABC Supply, we're a smaller company, you can say, oh, wow, well, I'm delighted to hear that. Here is another asset that I have for you. So I do know how to do the big corporation software, but because I know how to do that, it also allows me to do any type of software and to just do a little bit of adjusting to become a master at it very quickly. So what you're going to do is you're going to acknowledge that, oh, that's great that you might not have ABC software, but because you have this, I'm bringing my knowledge to the table and I can apply it to what you do have and even possibly expand it. Okay.
Okay. And then now, someone had mentioned that most jobs on LinkedIn have salaries now. How realistic are those? Are they, you know, the company posting the jobs, or is it other people out there posting those jobs?
Boy, that's a great question. So one of the resources that you already have is minnesotaworks.net. That is our state of Minnesota job bank, and we verify every job is real, every employer is real. LinkedIn doesn't necessarily do that with every job. So you need to be proactive on your end as well. So I keep using the company ABC Supply. It's working well today. Let's say that ABC Supply has a job that they're advertising for on LinkedIn. I want you also to go to ABC Supply's website and find that job and apply through the company. Applying through the company is always going to be your safest bet. So if you can do that, do it that way.
Okay, I'm just looking to see if there's any other questions here. Um, One person mentioned that they've not had any interviews where the employers didn't ask how much they want to make. I think you kind of already covered that, but do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, and again, this gets back to this research piece. You know, I always say follow the money. Obviously, the employer wants to pay you the least amount of money that they have to so that you come and do the best work possible and they save the most money. Now, that's all great in the big plan of the business scheme, but we all work for money. So, again, that's why it's so important for you to know what your skills are. So, talk to me about how you're going to make my company a bunch of money. And in turn, you hope to make some money too. And give me some examples. And I am going to feel very comfortable paying you that higher wage. Make me feel good about paying you a better wage, and I'll do it. I would rather pay you a better wage and have you come in and do the job really well than to have to put all the time and effort into training somebody else up. One other thing that I want you to really get seared onto your brain is that it is important for you to say, I am flexible and I love to learn. A lot of people that I interviewed would say, oh no, that, and they'd actually cross their arms and say, that's not the way I was taught, or that's not the way we do it. I want to challenge you on what do you care as long as it's not illegal. If the employer is asking you to do it a certain way, do it that way. And make sure during the interview that you let the employer know, I love to learn. I will do the job the way you want me to do it. You know, there are certain people that will say, well, that ain't in my job description. Let her do it. That's not my job. You have every right to also say at the interview, you know, I want to let you know that I really value a good job description, but I also want to let you know that if it isn't written in my job description and you want me to do it anyways, I will see that the job gets done the way you want it done. So, Pam, I think we're ready for another one.
Okay, so one of the questions is, do you have a recommended site that has a fairly comprehensive list of commonly used behavioral questions? There's so many lists out there. Is there one that you recommend?
Oh, that's a great. So I love Google. Sometimes I'll just Google top most behavioral questions asked at an interview, but also Career One Stop. So right before I did this interview workshop, I was messing around with Career One Stop's website. They've got assessments on there. They have behavioral questions. There's all kinds of excellent resources there. And again, that's the one where you're going to find out the pay range. So I would just flunk around on that website because it is very user friendly and you're going to find a lot of your answers to those questions. I also want to have you put in, Pam, in the chat, just the Career Force MN website. We have a lot of assessments and a lot of information on that website as well. Also, Pam, if you could put in our emails. So if you guys do have questions outside of this workshop and you want to get more detailed information from us, feel free to either email us. And like I said, Pam and I will go through the chat and we will make sure we've answered all your questions too. A lot of times right towards the end, a new question pops up that you just didn't think about during the workshop. So we will do our absolute best to answer them as well. Remember that we're here to help you. So interviewing is a job. It is. And you need to be prepared for it. Just like you're going to prepare for your first day of work, you're going to prepare for your interview. And if you can actually apply these skills and tools that you were taught today, you're going to get the job. And let us help you when in doubt. So, having said that, blessings to you. We are going to be looking forward to having you come work with us, work out in the working field. Pam, I'm also going to have you just put in minnesota.gov/careers. I also want to let you guys know that the state of Minnesota is doing a lot of hiring and we have a lot of great positions that are open right now. So take a look at our website too. Come on board and come work with us. So, okay, having said that, thank you for joining us today and blessings in all that you do. Bye bye.